rolling.
The last touchdown drive consumed more than 5 minutes, 24 seconds. Looking at it on film, was it from a clock management standpoint, was there something that should have happened?
No, it was kind of a comedy of errors on both sides of on both teams. You know, there were so many penalties there down the stretch. You know, I go back to, what was it, 10:32 left in the game. We did get confirmation from the Mountain West Conference that it was holding in the end zone. That should have been a safety called. Unfortunately, it wasn't called. I think at that time it was 24-17. That would have made it 24-19. We'd had great field position. But just back to the end of the game there were so many starts and stops. You know, they have 2 pass interference penalties. We also, the tripping call on Rick McCorley was not tripping. They've confirmed that should not have been called either. So just at the end of the game, you know, a lot of time was squandered away just because of penalties and mistakes. I mean, it was an odd deal. And then we get the ball back, 24 seconds left or 22 seconds left. So I don't know that it was time management. It was more just mistakes that were made. You know, some crazy things happened there late in the game.
Losing Johnny Williams, how confident are you the guys that you know, now have to step in and fill up, and how does it affect your defense?
Well, it affects our team. You know, just numbers-wise, when you look at how many season-ending injuries there have been now, you go back to Emmanuel Harris, who never even got started. Certainly Teton, Johnny Williams, Bijan Parker, season-ending. You just look out there on that practice field now, it's pretty thin. You know, it's pretty thin out there. At the nose guard position, though, we do have guys that have played a lot. Aaron Blackwell and Jermaine Conyers, both of them played pretty well against Colorado State. So we do have some depth at that position. You know, where it really affects you is when you get down to those scout squads. You know, fortunately, we're getting a little bit later in the season where we practice against each other a little bit more. But when you lose a Johnny Williams, now that affects who that 2 technique is down there at the other end of the field. You know, I feel pretty good at nose guard just because we've had 3 guys that have played in there.
Same thing in free safety, I guess. How much has Michael Sewell played, and how ready is it if he needs to go back?
Yeah, he hadn't played a lot. You know, it's been a little bit more of the coverage concern. He did play against the Air Force and got picked on a little bit, quite honestly. I think he's further along now than he was for the Air Force game. You know, so he's a guy. He's a guy that just continues to try to get better and work. We're also looking at Willie Hobdy at safety. Marcus Hayes, the true freshman who we're hoping to redshirt, is going to be traveling. If he has to play, he'll play. But, you know, we've really been hit with injuries at several positions, but, you know, safety, you'd have to say, has been one. Hopefully we get Maxwell back. I'm not sure that we will this week. So it's been, you know, it's kind of funny how injuries hit when they seem to hit at the same positions, and certainly safety has been one. But, you know, Sewell will get an opportunity. He needs to step up and take a better take advantage of his opportunity in this game better than he did against the Air Force.
Coach, what kind of challenges will Wyoming present to you guys?
They're good. You know, they're 4-3. You look at who they've lost to. They lost at Iowa. They lost to Oregon at home. They lost at Boise. You know, when you have a quarterback like they have, as big as he is, it kind of reminds me when I was at Pittsburgh. I don't know how I thought of this. I don't mean to bore you with this, but we were playing SMU in the Cotton Bowl. Danny Marino was our quarterback, but we were playing SMU, and Eric Dickerson was the tailback. And you look out there in that huddle at SMU, and Eric Dickerson was like the biggest guy in the huddle, but he's the tailback. It's kind of the same thing with Wyoming. You look out there, and number 17 is like the biggest guy on the field, but he's the quarterback. So anytime you play somebody that's as talented as he is, they know how to win now. You know, they got over the hump last year. They've played some closely contested games this year. But the quarterback, you know, a lot of people say he will be the first player drafted. Physically, he is unique. He's physically unique. And they'll run the ball. I mean, he's the guy. I give him a lot of credit. When the game is on the line or when they need it, he will run the football. There's no back down. There's no worrying about next May at the NFL draft. I mean, he's going to line up and carry that ball. And, we counted 21 times he was on the ground against Boise. And he's taking some shots. But I tell you, he keeps coming and he keeps coming. And he's a guy that actually looks for contact. I've got a lot of respect for him.
You compare him to anyone you've seen?
A little bit of Ben Roethlisberger. I actually, with ESPN, I actually did Ben Roethlisberger's last game at Miami of Ohio for ESPN. And he reminds me a little bit of a young Ben Roethlisberger. Maybe faster than Ben, but the same kind of skill set. I mean, he is a unique player.
Marcus Williams seems to be getting more snaps. Is he coming along as you had expected at this point?
He has. He played, I think, 45 snaps against Colorado State. He is developing into somebody. He's a freshman. So we're excited about his future. Catching the sail route the other night was good for him. It was good for our team. Everybody saw that one, but honestly, he played really well in there. So it's encouraging to see. It was fun to see Molina, on the other hand, a young guy here from Albuquerque, get that touchdown pass there, to make it 27-24. So both those guys are taller, longer, athletic guys that we expect big things from.
So you're saying Molina's going to get more reps?
Oh, every snap. Playing him. Did I say he was? Now wait a second, Marty. Can you fact check? Can we go back? Did anybody hear me say, JP, you asked the question about Molina. Did I say Molina was going to get more snaps? No, you said Molina was going to get more snaps. Okay, I'm good. You know I'm teasing you because that's the first mistake you've ever made. I've been trying to catch you now. It's been 6 years I've been trying to catch you. Finally, I got you.
But with that said, I'm a former wide receiver, and I've dropped a few touchdowns.
Did you play wide receiver?
Yes, I did in college. And I
Rick,
know it's like
can you go back and check the validity of this conversation? And I want to know catches. I want to blow it out now on Marty playing wide receiver. I know one thing, they didn't play man-to-man back in that day because they'd have come up and pressed you at the line of scrimmage, I guarantee.
But with that saying, Coach, it's no surprise that Aaron made those great catches because we saw him in Yapa football and in high school and junior college, and he's a clutch player.
He is. And, I remember the day we offered him a scholarship, Marty. It was in our summer football camp out here. And, we do the 7-on-7 kind of stuff. And he probably played 4 hours of football out here on a hot, summer Albuquerque day and went all day long and has tremendous hand-eye coordination. And that's why we've stayed with him through the Mesa Community College thing because he is a guy that truly goes up and has, I think, big-time skills of just going up and get that 50-50 ball. And that's just what he did on that touchdown pass. So, I mean, you're right. He's one of those guys that I'm sure from a young age had the ability to just catch the football. And he's a pretty exciting guy.
Was Stevens doing anything with Cates and caused all the offsides?
That was something. I mean, that was, you heard us talk all week. We talked about triggering, coming off the ball, trying to match their physicality. And I don't know if I've been in a game where the first 2 plays were offsides. I think we had 5 for the night. It really wasn't anything a whole lot different. They do a lot of kind of check with me at the line, so they give you that hard count to get the defense set to show their intentions, and then they kind of back off and check the play. But a lot of teams have done that. I think it's a case of, again, I think Stevens from Colorado State is an NFL-style quarterback. And very mature, took advantage of an aggressive style defensive line, and it borderlined on embarrassing how many times we jumped off sides in that game. Bob?
Go ahead, JP. I know you had a
With
question.
5 games to go, is your team or the players feeling that pressure to get to the 6 wins, or are they still loose and not looking at that?
I think they're loose. I think, I think last week was really important for us to respond. Certainly you know a lot more about Fresno State now after they went out and beat San Diego State the way they beat San Diego State. But standing here last week at this time, coming off that game in Fresno, backed in a corner with Colorado State coming in here on a Friday night, I think it was really important that our team respond, particularly physically, because Colorado State can slap you around. I think we feel better about ourselves right now than we did a week ago. Now, with that said, we've lost 2 straight games. But just as I said, Colorado State has lost to good teams. When you look at our 3 conference losses, to lose at Boise on a Thursday night, certainly there's some unique circumstances in that game with Tavaka not traveling and Lamar going down. Then we lose to Fresno up there on a Saturday night. All of a sudden, now Fresno's the front runner in the West Division. And then we lose at Colorado State at home in a very contested game. Even though we're 3-4, I think there's a very good attitude and a hungry kind of thing to get to another bowl game. I mean, let's call it what it is. It's trying to win 6 games now. And that's no easy task when you look at Wyoming, at Texas A&M, and at San Diego State, 3 of those last 5. So it's out there. As I said last week, I don't think it was a confidence issue necessarily with our team. It's a challenge, but yet if we can just avoid the injury thing. One thing that's really affected our team this year that's been different for us is the turnover margin. I hate to bring up a negative statistic and kind of write your story for you, but we're about 104th, I think, in turnover margin in this country right now, out of 129 teams. And we've won a lot of games around here because we have protected that football. And all of a sudden, we're kind of caught in the fumbleitis thing. 24-17, and Rick puts the ball on the ground at the 32-yard line there in the 4th quarter. I think we've only created or forced 9 turnovers. I think we've turned the ball over 15 times, and a majority of those have been fumbles. So that when, like a lot of teams, when there's not much margin for error, and all of a sudden you're losing that turnover battle, you look back at those games we won last year and the year before that were very close games. A lot of it had to do with protecting the football. And you look at the New Mexico State game, we turned that ball over 4 times. We turned that ball over 4 times and lost by 2 points. I can go in the games we won. When you think about the game we won, if you just quickly think of Abilene Christian, you think about Jake Rosshuller running that interception back. If you think about Tulsa, you think about Bijan Parker intercepting that ball at the end of the game. When you think about Air Force, you think about forced back-to-back turnovers against them, 2 possessions. So the turnover margin is something that's critical as we get into these last 5 games. We have to do better.
Third down conversions, Coach, is it difficult down in distances, execution? What's been the
Yeah, it's a little embarrassing right now, the third down percentage, and we've prided ourselves in not getting in those non-manageable third downs. It's a combination of things. We've had some penalties. We've been penalized a little bit more than we have in the past. Pass protection is an issue, right, when it's third and those passing downs. And then there's times we haven't run it as good. So it's easy, and I talked to our team today about all those things we just talked about. It's easy to identify those statistics. It's how do you change those statistics? And you have to practice that way to do it. You can't wait till Saturday and say, boy, we need to improve turnover margin. We need to practice to improve the turnover margin. But there are some things that jump out kind of glaringly.
Getting back to the fumbles with McCorley, does that affect you as a head coach, the number of times you're going to put the ball back in his hands?
Eventually it has to. Not because you feel like you need to set an example or anything. It's just productivity-wise. But, he's a guy that you see when the ball is in his hands, he can make things happen. You know, it's just one of those things you hope solves itself. But, I mean, let's be honest, when you put the ball on the ground as he has in key moments, you know, you've got an obligation as a coach to all of a sudden, this isn't working for us. But, man, with him, you just hate to, you know, his attitude has been, nobody feels worse than Rick does. Nobody feels worse than Rick does. But at some point, you know, that was a backbreaker. That was a backbreaker Friday night. And we got ourselves back in a position to win that game, and all of a sudden that ball's on the ground.
Has he talked about what's going on differently?
Well, a couple things, you know, and he won't be the one to tell you this, but he does have a hand and a wrist injury, and certainly that doesn't need to be front and center of why he's turning the ball over, but he does have a little problem with that wrist and that hand. Other than that, you know, it's just one of those things. I mean, there's been some good plays made too.
Coach, you talked about gut feeling with rotating your quarterbacks. Is it a gut feeling of like third down of the series before? Is it going the guys trotting out there? Is it at halftime you're thinking about this? How does it come? How do you make the decision on when to make the change?
It's hard, you know, and it's one as a coach you don't really want to have to make, right? In the perfect world, you're not doing that. Bob, you could go back to so many scenarios of schematically how a team's playing us, what the score of the game is. I think it's all those things. You know, Lamar did throw the ball pretty well Saturday night. You know, he had a couple opportunities and made a couple throws. Tavaka seems like he moves the chains a little bit better. If we can't run it up in there, again, based on scheme or based on score of the game. The good part of it is those guys and Colton Gerhardt are really good friends. I mean, don't minimize that. You know, Lamar, Tavaka, and Colton are really good guys that like each other, and that's a key factor. And our team kind of accepts what it is. So I don't think it's quite as dramatic as it used to be, but it's all the above come to play. All the above come in there to play. Because one big piece of our deal is, you know, are they letting the quarterback out? You know, are they taking those defensive ends and just running them up the field where the quarterback's not going to be a factor in the run game, quite honestly. He may be a play or two, but not consistently because of the way they play us. Well, then obviously you're going to have to produce yardage either by running it up in there, which that's great if we can do it, but if we can't, what do we do? And I think that's where Tavaka gives us a little more opportunity if we have to manufacture yards and points outside of our system a little bit.
You talked about the rhythm of the offense and the running game. Do you think that contributes to a lack of rhythm, changing the quarterback out?
Probably a little bit, but I think bigger than that would be our youth on the offensive line and who we're playing against. We were in a great rhythm against Air Force, right? Well, we could line up and block Air Force a little bit. We actually were in a good rhythm against Colorado State. We blocked Colorado State. But against Fresno, we couldn't block them. And it didn't matter who was in there at quarterback, there wasn't going to be much of a rhythm. You know, Tulsa was letting us get the ball outside with the quarterback. You know, so much of it is schematic, and then it always comes back to the players. It always comes back to the players. And against certain teams, our matchups right now aren't as conducive up front. You know, we're as young as we are. Let's keep in mind we're going to play another game this week without Teton Saltes or Israel Castellanos. We've got two offensive tackles that haven't played now for a couple weeks, and we're just not equipped to be able to handle that.
You ever worry that switching them out might make any one of them kind of tentative, like, oh no, I don't want to make a mistake here, or I don't want to do this or that?
Yeah, I worry more about Lamar because, you know, anytime you're the older guy and you've had the success that Lamar's had, sure, I worry a little bit about more with Lamar, you know, because Lamar's grinding it. You know, Lamar's put a lot into this program. He's built this program. I think it's a little bit different when you're the young guy that comes off the bench and you let it rip. You know, it always is. It always is. You know, so yeah, for Lamar, it's not ideal. It's not ideal. But I've been really impressed with Lamar, and You know, we've got 5 years with Lamar, so we're pulling for him.
Coach, you had mentioned about a few of the calls that have been changed in Mountain West. How does that work as far as like at the first of the game? God, it was crazy. We looked like we had a first down, looked obvious and stuff. You show on the thing. Then Gallup, he obviously didn't catch that ball. Are they supposed to catch it up there, but they're not giving him enough time to?
Yeah, I didn't watch the replay of the game on television, but maybe you did, and that's clearly we had a first down on that first possession, and then clearly Gallup didn't catch the ball out of bounds. You know, he didn't have possession. They actually buzzed down the referee late on Gallup's. On Gallup's, they tried to get it stopped, but it was too late. And they review every single play from that booth. So the idea of using your challenge is really kind of irrelevant, because unless there's a speed, an up-tempo thing. As long as they have enough time, they're going to review every call with every angle they have. Obviously, on an ESPN2 game or like this week ESPNU, they won't have as many cameras and as many angles. But they did buzz down Reggie Smith, the referee, to try to officially review Gallup's catch out of bounds. There were a lot of calls in that game. And you know, Reggie Smith, the referee's from my hometown. He's an unbelievable guy. I mean, he does a tremendous job. He's had some of the biggest games in the country. I mean, it's going to happen. It's going to happen.
Anything else?
One more thing. So you must have been happy with the how we stopped Gallup. I mean, he hadn't been stopped the whole time until we played him. So it's been
we held them to the lowest number of passing yards they've had. You know, we actually made them punt 5 times, which, you know, I guess they punted 4 times in the 4 years before we play them. I was really impressed with how physical our defense played and how we challenged them. Those 2 junior college corners, D'Angelo Ross and Jalen Burrell, I mean, they're up there. And think about the week before against Fresno, we gave up some shots. They didn't back off. And it was a very competitive game against a really, really good team. All right. Marty, do they have any video left of you in the archives, any of the wide receiver archives?
Go talk to John Lever.
Who?
John Lever.
John Leverett.
Yeah.
He's a defensive coach.
Well, he was a great college coach here in New Mexico. Won some championships.
Yeah, I know John well.